Hi again, this is another video on React. And in the last video, we talked about simple components and we built another simple component with a list. This video, I'd like to talk about stateful components. Okay, so these components are a little smarter than the simple component. So the simple component, it displays stuff and then it's kind of done. Stateful components have state, and state is similar to props, but where props is values passed into the component that you'll use to kind of configure the component and determine what it displays, right, and how it's configured, right? State, on the other hand, is sort of an internal state for the component. And internal state allows the component to remember what's going on and to change its state, okay? So what we'll do is let's make a component that will act as a light switch, okay? It'll just be a simple light switch. So what we'll do is we'll say class light switch, okay? Extends react.component. Since we've imported the React library above, it provides us with React, and a piece of that is called component, right? And this is a base class for all stateful components, okay? So we're going to use the new ES6 class syntax here. So we say class, a class name, which this will generate a component, right, which will be a tag. So this tag would look like this, light switch, maybe, right? Kind of like the other list tag and the hello tag that we created earlier. We'll use it in the same way. And that'll get us started there, right? And now, as a class, we have to do a couple things. Simple components just need to return some JSX. Component classes or stateful components need to include a render method, and that render method will return the JSX. Okay, so and essentially these components are going to generate JSX in the same way the simple components do it. Okay, they're just gonna have a different syntax and a little more code involved because they do more. Okay, so I'm gonna render. I'm going to have a render function, and that render function will return some JSX. So let's put our JSX in here, and we'll maybe make another div like we did before. And then inside the div here, we'll include a button that will say click. And then maybe we'll also have a, I don't know, how about an H2 or something that will say, on or off. Okay? Right? So you'll click this button and then it'll switch the light on or switch it off. Okay? So how do we, I'll put on in there for now, but how do we change this, right? So this is going to be our state. Okay? So another thing that we're going to include inside of our stateful component is a constructor. Okay? And the constructor will take in props as a parameter. Okay, so this is how props get passed into stateful components. In the same way you pass them in here, right, with our simple component, you're going to pass them into the constructor for your stateful component. Okay, the constructor should call super with props. Okay, so we're going to call super like that. Okay. The constructor should also define the state for the component. Okay, so state is always an object with properties. Okay, so all of the key values in the object or the property values in the object are the state for the component. So you can have as many properties as you like. Our component will just have one property. Okay, so what we do is we say this dot state equals some object. And I'll make a property called isOn and set it to false. So in our default mode, the light switch will be off. Okay, right? This means the light is off, and if it was true, the light will be on. Okay, so what I'd like to do is I'd like to display the state in my component down here. So it'll go here, right? So what we can do is we can say, use some curly braces, right? And I'm going to use the trinary, I forget what they call it. It's like the simple single line if statement. So what we'll do is we'll say, hey, this dot state dot is on. So if that's true, we'll print an on into the component, colon, if is on is false, we'll print an off. Okay? Maybe we'll even say light on and light off. Okay? Often what you'll do is you'll pass in default values for your state via props. So actually, if we passed in an is on property with props, we could have said props.isOn right here, and then that could have been our default value. Okay? Why don't we just make that false for now? Okay? Let's give this a quick test in the browser here. I'll refresh. Oh wait, I forgot I was doing this earlier, and I had already built one of these and I'd called it toggle. Let me delete that, right? Actually, let's save it, because and I've also forgot, if we're going to render this component called light switch, then we actually need to put it down here in our React DOM, right? So let's actually put light switch right here. I forgot about that, right? So there we go. Now we got light switch there. Now let's render it. Oh, there we go. So there's my light switch there. The light is off right now, right? And then when we click this, we want to turn the light on, okay? If our light, the is on property right here was true by default, then our component would display light on, right? So let's give that a quick refresh here. Oh, look, light on, right? Okay, so let's put that back to false, and then let's talk about how we're going to handle click events, right? Or any kind of event, right? But we'll use our button here to generate a click, right? So there's a couple things here. What we're going to do is we're going to add an onClick method. So this listens for click events on this button, okay? Now remember, this is JSX, it's not regular JavaScript, but though this is the same onClick used by JavaScript, so it's spelled the same way, but it's handled a little bit differently here. So there's a couple situations that are not quite the same, okay? But it's very close, okay? So we can kind of treat this in much the same way as you might treat it in regular JavaScript, okay? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a function that handles when you turn on the light switch, right? So I'll call it, toggle switch. There you go. And I'll use the ES6 function style where we don't have to type function in front of this, right? Okay. So we'll toggle the switch there. And when you toggle the switch, what we want to do is to toggle the switch, what we want to do is we want to call it from this thing down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this dot, actually let me write it this way first. Let's make a fat arrow function. This is a new ES6 function, right? So anytime you click the button, it'll execute this function, and as the body of the function there, we will call on this dot toggle switch. Okay, so we'll save that, and then why don't we put a console log message here, and then we can say, hey, toggle switch, right? And we'll just see that in the console, right? So we'll save that. So we've got our button. You're going to click it. It's going to execute a function, and that function will call this other function here. So inside of a stateful component, since it's a class, all the properties that belong to this class we access via this. Okay? So let's refresh that. I'll click on this thing and you can see it says toggle switch at the bottom there. Okay, so now that we've got that working, how do we actually change state? Okay, now this is a really important point. You never modify state directly. Okay, and the reason why is if we change state directly, React is not aware of the change that you made. Okay, so in order for React to be aware, we always have to change state with the setState method. So we'll say this.setState. So we're not going to do this. We're not going to say this.state, equals some new value. Okay, instead, what we do is we say this.setState, and we call the setState method. Okay, and the setState method takes in an object, and it maps this object to the state object here. Okay, so we don't have to include all the properties of state. So if our state had more properties here and we only wanted to change isOn, we don't have to include all the other properties. We only need to include the isOn property. Okay, so what we'll do here is we'll say isOn is a new value, and the value that I want to set is the opposite of the current isOn value. So let's get the current isOn value from this .state.isOn. And then if I put the exclamation point in front here, that will, that's the logical, or I forget what they call that. That's the switch, not the switch, but the invert the Boolean operator. I forget what they call that. Anyway, we'll put that there, and the exclamation point says that if this was true, then it becomes false, and if it was false, it becomes true. And so now we've got a new object with a property with a new value, and then setState, maps that value to the state property here, and then also notifies React that our component needs to be re-rendered. Okay, and then React will go through and re-render this component for us, and that makes React real efficient because it can pick and choose the elements that it's going to re-render. Okay, let's give it a try. So we'll save that. We'll go to the browser here, and we'll click so the light is off, and I click and now the light is on. And if I click, the light goes off again, and then it goes on again. Okay, so anyway, so there's a quick example kind of showing you how to create a stateful component that contains state and also handles click actions. Okay, so thanks for watching, and I hope that is useful information. Thanks.